This happened 2 nights ago, and it's taken me this long to properly express what will probably be the worst night of my life. I had just turned 14, and for my birthday, my dad promised to take me camping, which he kept his word on. On a nice September morning, we set out for our favorite camping spot the family would use every summer. But this summer, we had skipped our camping trip for an amusement park trip instead, something I was not okay with. Being out in the woods was the only thing that made me feel alive, and my dad knew that, which is why he promised me this special trip. Just the two of us. My dad had promised to teach me how to set up snare traps, which I was extremely excited about. I was always eager to learn more about survival skills. When we arrived at the campsite, however, we were stopped by park rangers and police, who told us there had been a major gas leak in the area and that the grounds were closed. Saddened by the news, my dad reassured me that he would find us a new spot, something off the grid and secluded, a truly unique camping experience. His words instantly lifted my spirits, and I felt my excitement return. As I watched my dad unfold his roadmap and tilt it from side to side, his face suddenly lit up with joy. He let out a quiet but blissful bingo before telling me he had found us the perfect spot. I believed him. My dad was taking me on this one-on-one father-son camping trip to teach me primitive survival skills, and I felt on top of the world. He did warn me, though, that it was a bit of a drive, so I should buckle up. Since I hadn't gotten much sleep the night before from sheer excitement, I decided to catch some shut-eye while he drove. I'm not sure how much time had passed, but before I knew it, my dad was gently nudging me awake. We had arrived. Dad parked the truck at the edge of a small clearing and killed the engine, grinning as he stretched his arms across the steering wheel. "Well, here we are, champ. What do you think?" I rubbed the sleep from my eyes and glanced out the window. The trees were denser here, the air somehow darker and quieter than the campgrounds we usually went to. "Looks different," I said. "Way more trees. I like it." "Good. That's the idea," Dad replied, climbing out of the truck. "Off the grid, just like I promised." He stretched, then slapped the side of the truck bed. "All right, grab the packs from the back and give me a hand. We'll start with the tent before it gets too late." I hopped down eagerly. "Yes, sir. I've been waiting all summer for this." Dad chuckled as he pulled a tarp from the gear. "I know you have. You handle the poles, I'll get the ground tarp set. Teamwork, right?" "Teamwork," I said, slinging one of the bags over my shoulder. The weight of it didn't matter. My chest buzzed with elation, the kind that made me feel like this was going to be the best trip of my life. How wrong I was. That's when I heard it. Faint at first, like dry leaves brushing against each other. A soft shuffling just beyond the tree line. I froze, the pole half raised in my hand. "Dad," I whispered, glancing toward the woods. He paused, listening. The sound came again, slow, uneven steps in the underbrush, then silence. Dad straightened, brushing dirt from his hands. "Probably a deer," he said calmly, though his eyes lingered on the trees a moment longer than I expected. He gave me a reassuring smile. "They're more scared of us than we are of them." I nodded, pretending to believe him, but my grip on the pole tightened. The woods suddenly felt deeper, darker, like they were holding their breath. "Common," Dad said, his voice steady. "Tent first, then we'll get a fire going. That'll keep anything curious away." I bent back over the poles, but my ears kept straining toward the forest, listening for that sound again. I told myself it was nothing, just a deer, like Dad said, but a part of me kept waiting to hear it again. When nothing else stirred, I forced my focus back on the tent. Between the two of us, we had it standing in no time. Dad hammered the stakes into the ground while I clipped the fabric to the poles, and before long it actually looked like something we could sleep in. The small sense of accomplishment settled my nerves, at least a little. Once the tent was up, Dad gathered some kindling and larger logs while I cleared a small pit for the fire. The sun was already dipping low, streaking the treetops with gold, and the air was cooling fast. When the first flames caught and began to grow, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. The fire's crackle filled the silence, and the shadows it pushed back made the forest feel less heavy. Dad shared a few funny stories with me over the fire, the kind that made me laugh harder than I probably should have. When the laughter died down, he leaned back against a log and told me I should turn in early. We had a big day ahead of us, setting traps at first light. I crawled into my sleeping bag inside the tent, but no matter how hard I tried, sleep wouldn't come. Maybe it was the nap I'd taken on the drive over, or maybe it was just the thrill of finally being out in the woods. My body was tired, but my mind buzzed with restless energy. After what felt like hours of tossing and turning, I finally slipped back outside to stoke the fire, hoping the soft glow would calm me down. But before I could grab a log, a sharp crack split the silence. A loud snap, somewhere just beyond the fire's light. I froze where I stood, every muscle stiff, like a deer caught in headlights. I held my breath and waited for another sound, another step, anything. But the woods fell silent again, so quiet it made my ears ring. My chest tightened. Freaked out, I backed away from the fire and slipped inside the tent, pulling the zipper shut with trembling fingers. The thin walls of fabric felt flimsy, but it was the only safety I had. I heard it again. Snap. A sharp snap outside, closer this time. My breath caught in my throat. It wasn't the random pop of the firewood. This was heavier, like weight pressing down on a branch until it broke. I bolted upright and leaned toward Dad, shaking his shoulder. Dad, wake up. He groaned, rolling onto his back. What is it? He mumbled, his voice thick with sleep. There's something out there, I whispered urgently. I heard it again, a branch breaking. It sounded close. Dad rubbed his eyes, listening for a moment, but the woods had already gone silent. Finally, he gave a low sigh. Buddy, it's just the forest. Could be a raccoon, a deer, anything. You've got to try to relax. But it sounded big, I pressed. He gave my arm a reassuring squeeze. I know it feels that way. The dark makes every sound worse than it is. Do your best to block it out and get some sleep. We've got a long day tomorrow. I nodded, though my ears stayed fixed on the silence outside, waiting for another snap. Dad was already drifting back to sleep, but I lay awake, wide-eyed, straining to hear what the woods were hiding. I stayed sitting up for a while, every muscle tense, waiting for the sound to come again. The silence outside was so complete it almost hurt, like the whole forest was holding its breath. My mind spun with possibilities, an animal, a person, something else entirely, but the longer I listened, the more I realized nothing else was coming. Dad's steady breathing beside me was oddly comforting. If he wasn't worried, maybe I shouldn't be either. Slowly, I eased back down into my sleeping bag, pulling it tight around my shoulders. I tried to do what Dad said, block it out. Focus on the warmth of the bag, the faint crackle of the fire outside, and the steady rhythm of my own breathing. My eyelids grew heavy, my thoughts fuzzier, until finally the weight of exhaustion pulled me under. I don't know how long I'd been asleep when a faint sound pulled me back into consciousness. At first, I thought I'd dreamed it, but then I heard it again, soft, metallic jiggling, right by my head. The zipper on the tent. My groggy mind jumped to this simplest explanation. Dad must have been getting up to use the bathroom. I rolled onto my side, ready to drift off again, until I glanced toward his sleeping bag. He was still there, lying on his stomach, hiding his head under his sleeping bag. Then the zipper sounded again, slow, careful, teeth pulling apart one by one. I turned my head, and in the dim glow of the dying firelight, I saw the tent door begin to part. A faint breeze slipped through, making the loose fabric flap in and out like a slow breath. Panic surged through me. I reached over and grabbed Dad's shoulder, shaking him hard. Dad, wake up, please. Nothing. He didn't blink, didn't flinch. Then, from outside the tent, a voice cut through the night. Low, steady, familiar. "Son," it said, "get out of the tent. Now." I froze. It was Dad's voice. Exactly his voice. My head whipped back toward the figure beside me, desperate for an explanation, for some kind of sign. This was just a dream. But what I saw made my blood run cold. It wasn't my dad. Not even close. The face staring back at me was dirty, smeared with mud and grime. The man's lips peeled back in a wide grin, showing rows of crooked yellow teeth. His smile was too wide, stretching farther than it should have, like he was enjoying my confusion. The flaps stirred again in the wind, and I realized I was trapped, caught between whatever was outside and whatever this thing beside me really was. My whole body screamed at me to move, to get away from the thing grinning beside me. The tent door hung open, the night air spilling in, and I thought if I could just get outside, if I could just run to Dad's voice, I'd be safe. I shoved at my sleeping bag and scrambled toward the flap, but before I could make it out, cold fingers clamped around my wrist. I froze. The grip was like iron, rough and unyielding, pinning me in place. My breath hitched as another hand shot out, grabbing my other arm, yanking me back down toward the ground. "No." The word ripped from my throat, weak and broken. I twisted, trying to wrench free, but the hands only tightened. Filthy nails dug into my skin, and that wide, toothy grin loomed closer, stretching impossibly as if my struggle delighted it. The open flap swayed just feet away, freedom dangling within reach, yet I couldn't move an inch. The hands clamped tighter, dragging me down. I thrashed, panic flooding every nerve, when suddenly another force seized me, stronger, familiar. "Got you." Dad's voice, real this time, roared above the chaos as he yanked me out through the open flap. I tumbled into the dirt, gasping, while he pulled me behind him. In one fluid motion, he drew the pistol he always carried in the wilderness. The thing inside lunged for the opening, its grin gleaming in the firelight. Bang! Bang! The shots thundered through the clearing, each one lighting the night for a split second. The tent jerked with every impact, then sagged into silence. For a long moment, all I could hear was the ringing in my ears and the crackle of the dying fire. Dad stood over me, chest heaving, gun still trained on the torn flap. When nothing else moved, he pulled his phone from his pocket and dialed. His voice was clipped, urgent. It felt like hours before the rangers and deputies arrived, their floodlights cutting through the trees. I clung to Dad's side as they swept the area, and one by one their shouts cut through the night. That night, officers combed the area to find this man's victims before us. Not one, not two. 22. They were scattered across the woods, hidden under leaves slumped against trees, half buried in shallow earth. Men, women, and children. Skeletal collateral. The officers' voices grew hushed, horrified, as the scope of it sank in. I couldn't look. I buried my face against Dad's sleeve, but the image of that wide, filthy grin was already carved into me forever. I never plan on camping again.